Ohayo gozaimasu.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Well, this is the last day of the TCAD 5. We are drawing close to the end of this meeting, so you are taking pictures, commemorative photographs and so forth. I know that you are busy, but we'd like to start with this part of the conference as scheduled. So, this is the last day of the TCAD 5, during which time we've had heated discussions. In this plenary 6, we would like to ask the co-organizers, as well as representative of the African Development Bank, who also acted as the chairs of each session of the thematic sessions, to report on the summary of the meetings. I've heard that each of the 5 different thematic sessions had fruitful discussions as a result of the active contribution by the participants. Now I would like to give the floor to Prime Minister Haile Mariam to lead the discussions, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. In thematic session 1, President Kim of the World Bank chaired the meeting under the theme Private Sector, Trade and Investment as a Driving Force of Development. Now I would like to ask His Excellency Mr. Diop, Vice President of the World Bank, to come to the podium and to deliver his report. Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency Prime Minister Mori, Your Excellency Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, Excellencies Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to present this summary of the thematic session, the private sector, trade and investment and engines of development. Before presenting the report, I would like to thank all participants for their contribution to the discussions. The thematic session on the private sector, trade and investment as engine of development was chaired by Dr. Jim Yong Kim, President of the World Bank Group, and moderated by Makhtar Diop, Vice President for Africa of the World Bank. It consisted of dialogue with the 3 panelists, Samuel Kwame Tim Adu of Yenden Agro Processing, Ghana, Joseph Ogutu for Safaricom, Kenya, and Jean-Philippe Prosper from IFC, followed by general discussion. The session also benefited from special addresses by Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, and Minister Motegi, Minister of Trade and Economy and Industry of Japan. This summary presents highlights of the wide-ranging and rich discussion and exchange of views. Both the President of the World Bank Group and the UN Secretary General emphasize the transformational power of the private sector, trade and investment in terms of employment creation and increased opportunities, especially for young people. The Secretary General noted the important role that the international community could play in creating an enabling environment for trade and investment, and the contribution of initiatives such as the Principle for Responsible Agriculture Investment and the UN Global Compact. The METI Minister noted the Japan's commitment to developing business relationships underpinned by trust and highlighted the considerable experience of Japanese businesses in areas of potential development for Africa, including geothermal energy, freight rail, water purification. He indicated that the government of Japan's commitment to providing increased support, both financially and through training. He also announced the planned increase a JETRO field presence in the continent. While the strong economic growth of the past decade, as well as sound macroeconomic policies and improving business environment was commended, it was also noted that this growth had not generated the necessary levels of employment. To reduce poverty and increase shared prosperity, particularly for young people, future generations will need to create jobs. This underlines the importance of the private sector, which is responsible for the creation of 9 out of 10 jobs. It also noted the international private sector, including Japanese companies, can help generate employment and make sufficient profit. Many participants emphasize the importance of the manufacturing sector, including agribusinesses, a key area of growth of the private sector in Africa. There were general recognition that private investment is an increasingly important complement to ODA, and that both national and international private investment is the driver of growth and employment. Further, given Africa's low share of global trade and FDI, as well as low level of regional integration, increasing trade and investment are equally important. The discussion centered around 3 important sectors: agribusiness, ICT, and SMEs, and a number of common themes emerged as important areas to be addressed. First, the centrality of business environment was emphasized by participants who noted the importance of policy predictability underpinning the increase of productivity and investment in Africa. It was also emphasized that the need to conduct legal and regulatory framework at the regional level. The importance of markets and consumer demand within Africa were noted. Markets are growing both as a result of rising income and regional integration and offer significant opportunities on return of investment. Some participants note the importance of government procurement as a market for the private sector in Africa. For long-term sustainability, participants stress the importance of reducing cost of production. Lack of infrastructure, particularly energy and transport, were identified as major constraints to competitiveness of African businesses. While ambitious infrastructure development programs currently being undertaken by governments with support from development partners were commended, there were recognition that much more is required, particularly in terms of bulk transport, such as railroads. The Sustainable Energy for All program, launched by the United Nations and supported by the World Bank and other partners, was recognized as an important initiative, but the limited availability and high cost of energy remains a significant obstacle for growth in Africa. The importance of labor skill was highlighted for productivity and competitiveness. This requires both education that equips students for the demand of a market-based economy and technical vocational training to develop particular skills. The lack of access to finance, particularly for SMEs, was noted as a key challenge that remains to be addressed. The importance of incubating entrepreneurship, including in base of the pyramid sectors like agribusinesses, was stressed. Foreign, including Japanese companies, have an important role to play in this regard. Large companies can also serve as incubators for SMEs by providing opportunity for subcontracting and service provision. While there is a role for states, the mixed global record of state involvement in incubating private enterprises suggests careful design is required. The specific challenges faced by women entrepreneurs were noted. These include lack of access to finance, information, and training, as well as issues such as legal and regulatory barriers in inequitable property rights. Participants emphasized the importance of PPPs and dialogue at the sub-regional level and regional level to build a better understanding of the needs of the private sector and create supportive policy environment. Participants from the private sector of Japan identified similar constraints and indicated that policy predictability, particularly in the energy sector, are important elements that are affecting foreign direct investment in African countries, as well as bureaucratic impediments such as visa for expatriate experts. While recognizing the constraints, both African governmental and private sector participants urged the Japanese private sector to participate more actively and be less risk-averse. They also noted that Africa is poised to be a future growth pole with significant investment potential, and the time for engagement is now. There is a danger that an overcautious approach by Japanese companies will result in loss of opportunities. This was the summary of our discussion during the first session. I would like to thank all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President Diop. Thematic session 2, which focused on the theme Building Foundation for Growth, was chaired by the President of the African Development Bank, I therefore call upon Excellency Dr. Kaberuka to come to the podium and to give his report. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Prime Minister Mori, Prime Minister Hailemariam, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday I was tasked with chairing the session related to the sectoral basis of growth, which covered infrastructure, agriculture, human development, and environment. Participants observed that over the last few years, Africa has demonstrated stronger growth, with the African economy for the first time in decades growing faster than population. Indeed, 6 of the fastest growing economies in the world are now in Africa, which is rapidly emerging as the second fastest growing continent. The key question then was how to maintain this growth, make it equitable, and accelerate it, especially in the context of the 3 mega trends which will have a far-reaching impact on the continent's growth trajectory. These are youth population, a growing middle class, and rapid urbanization. On infrastructure, participants highlighted the need to bridge the wide gap existing at the moment. No country in the world has been able to sustain growth beyond 7% without addressing the infrastructure deficit, in particular energy, connectivity, and transport. The annual infrastructure gap is estimated at about $42 billion. Bridging this gap will require increased domestic efforts and better resource management. More importantly, it will require leveraging of capital markets. The keynote speaker, the President of the Ivory Coast, emphasized the important role which the Japanese-funded EPSA, which the African Development Bank manages, has played in financing African infrastructure, in particular regional corridors. Participants observed, though, that infrastructure is a means to an end, and the end must be trade to facilitate increased employment. Therefore, while the priority is to work on hard infrastructure, especially those projects that have a strong regional dimension, the priority is to focus also on soft infrastructure, such as one-stop border posts, where JICA has played a big role. Participants committed to address the remaining constraints hampering the movements of goods, people, and capital. On agriculture, participants observed that raising agricultural productivity is the first step to job creation, productive employment, and exports, thereby creating a virtuous economic cycle. They observed that this is what happened in Japan and other Asian countries. Due to growth in global demand for agricultural exports, there is an opportunity for smallholders to move up the value chain, provided they can be supported with the right policy environments, infrastructure, access to finance, access to technology, and to risk management tools. An issue that was brought up but not concluded upon was one related to genetically modified organisms as a means for enhancing agricultural productivity. Participants urged the need for analysis on this matter so that Africa can benefit from science and genetics. On human capital, the group observed that the current demographic dynamics pointed to an emergence of a potential demographic dividend on the continent, with the right education and training. They emphasized the importance of TCAD 5, putting emphasis on delivery of low-cost, high-value education, but also to take advantage of current technology to leapfrog. On the environment, the group observed that the ecological footprint of Africa has increased by 250% in the last 50 years. And they noted that episodes of drought, flooding, and other natural disasters are happening now more frequently than they have been in the past. It will be important to build resilience across the systems in the coming years. Participants observed that climate change will have a major impact on the African economy in the coming years, with the western parts of the continent suffering frequent droughts, while the eastern parts of the continent suffer the opposite, frequent floods. They urged for a collective action in the context of TCAD 5 on this matter. Participants concluded by acknowledging that Africa's priorities match those of TCAD 5. In other words, growth, trade, investment, and sustainability. While there are obstacles, there are also tremendous opportunities, especially if there is a full African ownership. We need to work together on this agenda so that Africa's collective potential is realized. Participants look forward to work together within the TCAD process for infrastructure identified in the PIDA program, in particular energy, transport, agribusiness, and skills development. And there ends my report. I thank you.
Thank you very much, President Kaberuka. In Thematics 3, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon chaired the meeting under the theme towards post-MDGs. Therefore, I would like to ask His Excellency Adbulaziz, UN Special Advisor on Africa, to come to the podium to give the report. Excellency, you have the floor.
Prime Minister Mori, Prime Minister Desalegn, Honorable Heads of State and Government. Thematic Session 3 specifically focused on Africa's priorities for the post-2015 development agenda and addressed three interrelated issues. The first related to those MDGs that continue to be challenges for Africa, in particular those related to poverty, education and health, and the way to accelerate their achievement by 2015. The second highlighted new and emerging challenges to sustainable development in Africa, including environmental sustainability, energy and population dynamics. The third concentrated on overarching issues of relevance to the post-2015 development agenda with respect to human security, global partnership, and the means of implementation. The session was chaired by His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, and listened to a keynote address by Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the President of the Republic of Liberia, and the co-chair of the United Nations Secretary General's high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda. And we listened also to 6 distinguished keynote speakers after that. High-level participants, including heads of state and government, discussed how to ensure that Africa's development needs and priorities are fully reflected in the post-2015 development agenda. And the report before you that was circulated today have a full reflection of account, which I will try to summarize. It was noted that there are now 942 days left before the deadline on the Millennium Development Goals. Therefore, TCAD 5 should galvanize action to achieve the MDGs to strategize on how to tackle MDGs that are unlikely to be met and help to set the stage for the success of the new development framework. The United Nations Secretary General High-Level Panel submitted its report on the 30th of May 2013 following a wide range of consultative process aimed at reflecting Africa's interests and priorities in the report. The report acknowledges the successes of the MDGs and recommends that the new development framework should carry forward a transformative agenda that would be based on the spirit of the Millennium Declaration, with a particular focus on issues such as poverty, hunger, water and sanitation, women and youth empowerment, education and health. It was noted that the intense regional consultations in Africa on post-2015 development agenda identified 4 major priority areas. First, the structural economic transformation and inclusive growth, including strong, sustained and inclusive growth, agriculture, food security and nutrition, green growth, industrialization and value addition, and enhanced technological capacities. Second is innovation, technological transfer, research and development. Third is human development, and fourth as financing and partnership. Moreover, it was noted that achieving the development outcomes require an enabling environment at national, regional, and global levels. Some of the enablers identified as prerequisites for the post-2015 development agenda were mentioned, such as peace and security, good governance, transparency and fighting corruption, human rights for all, regional integration, and strengthened institutional capacity. It was noted that the remaining period till 2015 would provide an opportunity to accelerate progress towards the MDGs, including through targeted projects to reduce poverty rates, eradicate polio, increase immunization, combat AIDS, and ensure access of clean water and nutrition. It was also noted that human security is an effective approach in identifying and addressing widespread and cross-cutting challenges to the survival and livelihood and dignity of people, because it strengthens capacity building and empower individuals and communities, especially women and young people. On the new and emerging challenges, it was noted that according to the IMF and the World Bank, Africa should see growth rate of 5.5% this year and over 6% in 2014. However, for the continent to sustain and even increase this economic growth, there is a need to address three mega trends: population dynamics, high income expanding middle class, and faster urbanization. These trends generate rapid growth in demand for food, energy, water, and resources. Participants noted that the continent is particularly faced with the double challenges for its sustainable development agenda, whereby growth must come with a strong and resilient natural ecosystem at its foundation. Participants, a final point, highlighted growing concerns about the need to address issues such as maritime development and its importance in promoting the transformative agenda for Africa. Moreover, it was emphasized that the maritime industry and oceans are more than source for food or energy. The African maritime sector is very crucial, not only to the protection of the environment, but also for the generation of wealth. Participants finally further stressed that climate change and disaster risk reduction are issues that of current the MDGs have not addressed sufficiently. Yet in Africa, many people have been affected by floods, droughts, and other disasters. In this regard, participants stressed the important need to focus on reducing risks of disaster and building resilience in communities through preparedness and prevention strategies and programs across the sectors. Some key recommendations and conclusions are also listed in the report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Special Advisor Adbulaziz. In thematic session 4, Her Excellency Mrs. Helen Clark, Administrator of UNDP, chaired the meeting under the theme Promotion of African Development through Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. I'd like to ask Her Excellency to deliver her report.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister Mori, Chair of the African Union Commission, and heads of state and government and ministers, distinguished guests. Yes, it's my pleasure to report on yesterday's thematic session on driving African development through gender equality and the empowerment of women. And we were very fortunate yesterday to have on our panel 3 outstanding women who know a great deal about breaking through glass ceilings and whose achievements are an inspiration to women everywhere. They were President Joyce Banda of Malawi, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, and African Union Commission Chair Dr. Lamini Zuma. As President Banda said to our meeting, women are at the centre of our hope for Africa. President Johnson Sirleaf called upon us not to look at African women and girls merely as disadvantaged, but rather, quote, to turn it around and see women as the greatest opportunity for unleashing the full potential of the continent. We are also very fortunate to begin our session with remarks from President Paul Kagame, who has ensured that women are at the very centre of Rwanda's development agenda. President Kagame set the stage for our discussion by reminding us that gender equality, quote, is not just a moral issue, it is a rights issue and a shared responsibility that concerns every member of our society. Throughout our session, which included senior government ministers and officials, UN agency heads and civil society voices, speakers referred to the evidence that gender equality drives development. Reference was made to the many international and regional frameworks promoting gender equality and women's empowerment, including the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Platform for Action, and the African Women's Decade, which was launched by the African Union. What came through the discussion consistently was the need to focus on implementation. As Chairperson Lamini Zuma said, quote, "In all our policies and budgets, we should make sure that there is enough money that is going to women." There was a clear consensus that driving progress requires investments in women's economic empowerment. And many of the discussants shared stories of how in their countries even tiny investments had tremendous multiplier effects across a wide range of development areas. The evidence was clear that when a woman has more income, she is not only materially better off herself, so is her family, and so are her children's health and their education. And it was also noted that women should be able to access the sexual and reproductive health services they seek. High on the agenda at the panel was a call for women to be at the centre of approaches to improving food security. In sub-Saharan Africa, we understand women make up a majority of those working in agriculture and food production. But overall, they have not been able to be as productive as men because of a range of constraints in a number of settings. Where women can own and control land and get equal access to resources, credit and agricultural extension services, their contribution to overall production and food security grows. President of Liberia shared with us her country's food security program, in which women farmers have been placed front and centre. And we also heard from West Africa of the role of women in the blue economy derived from the fishing sector. The challenges of tackling important issues such as violence against women and girls and early marriage were also discussed extensively. It was noted that responses to conflict and disaster need to include specific and targeted interventions to address women's security and needs. Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs in his contribution specifically noted the importance of bringing women's perspectives into conflict prevention and peace-building processes and when drawing up disaster risk reduction strategies and plans. Many of the panellists and the discussants spoke on the importance of having a critical mass of women in decision-making positions. Measures to bring more women into such positions often requires more than the elimination of just discriminatory practices. Affirmative measures may well need to be taken to advance women's participation in political and other decision-making spheres more quickly. At this discussion, there was a clear view that the TCAD process can help to drive gender equality and women's empowerment, and a strong call also came for TCAD to engage actively with women leaders and civil society groups across Africa. We noted that yesterday's thematic session has a lot of resonance with other debates underway on the post-2015 development framework. The high-level panel, of which President Johnson Sirleaf has been a co-chair, reported just a couple of days ago and identifies the need to address violence against women and girls, empower women economically, and empower women to take on leadership roles in public life. Just the same kinds of issues as were discussed at yesterday's session. Now is the time, we all agreed at the panel session, to move from rhetoric to action and implementation, and that will require concrete plans with measurable outcomes and sufficient funding. We understood that this was the first time that TCAD has formally addressed gender equality as a driver of development. Judging by the political commitment demonstrated in the room yesterday, I think we were all leaving very hopeful that this issue will remain high on the TCAD agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clerk. In thematic session 5, His Excellency Mr. Ramtane Lamamra, Commissioner for Peace and Security of the African Union, chaired the meeting under the theme Strengthening Peace Building. I would like to ask His Excellency Ambassador Lamamra to come to the podium and give his report.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your Excellencies, heads of states and government, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. In summarizing a very substantial and productive session on enhancement of peace building, I first wish to thank Their Excellencies, the heads of states and governments who attended and actively participated in the session, as well as all the delegations for their valuable contributions. The session was organized in 2 subsessions. The first one focused on the development and humanitarian assistance, governance and institutional capacity, and the second on African initiatives and regional efforts. There was a special focus on Mali and the Sahel region in the discussions. I would like to thank His Excellency Mr. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, and His Excellency President Dioncounda Traoré, President of Mali, who made the opening remarks. The Prime Minister of Japan reiterated this government's and the people of Japan's commitment for Africa's peace and stability. He rightly stated that there can be no development without peace. To this end, the Prime Minister announced Japan's intention to support the continent and in particular the Sahel region with 3 concrete measures. First, Japan will provide 100 billion yen in assistance over the 5 next years for the development and stability in the Sahel region. Second, Japan will provide assistance to enhance the capability of the countries in the Sahel region to enable them to engage in counter-terrorism and the maintenance of security by training 2,000 security personnel across the region and supplying appropriate equipment. Third, Japan will build a framework for dialogue with the Sahel region governments in a multi-layered manner and foster an even stronger and more solid relationship with the region. President Dioncounda Traoré highlighted that Mali's contribution to the enhancement of peace building was to share Mali's experience in dealing with the various crises that have afflicted the country. He talked about the importance of building disciplined and well-equipped armies to protect institutions and the territorial integrity of the countries and deal with the multinational threats. Regional cooperation, good governance, mechanism for dialogue and reconciliation, and the need for job creation for the millions of unemployed youth across the continent of Africa were also highlighted. The President of Mali also called for a continental military capacity to promptly react to emerging crises. Excellencies, much was said, and I may omit some important contributions, but there were some recurrent themes in most of the interventions. On development and humanitarian assistance, many delegations underscored that humanitarian assistance and socio-economic reconstruction act as the foundation for the consolidation of peace. Noteworthy was the importance of narrowing inequalities, the promotion of youth employment, and women empowerment.
On governance and institutional capacity, the delegations talked about the need for prevention by putting in place mediation mechanisms to resolve disputes peacefully and the strengthening of the judiciary systems and the rule of law. A special accent was put on capacity building in post-conflict situations to strengthen statutory institutions, better partnerships, and frameworks to deal with the various challenges. On African initiatives and regional efforts, there was a general agreement that the AU and regional economic communities have demonstrated greater leadership in pushing for African solutions to Africa's problems, and that it was important for the international community to continue to support African endeavors. Reference was made in this context to the African Union post-conflict reconstruction and development policy and to the recently launched African Solidarity Initiative, which are built on the principle of collective self-reliance. The importance of making Africa a relevant actor in global governance was also highlighted, in particular by advocating for the reform of the United Nations Security Council so that Africa is better represented and its voice heard. The need for regional organizations to develop their security architecture was mentioned, and as was highlighted the importance of ensuring coherence between the continental level AU institutions and the regional economic communities, and also between the RECs and national governments. The participants stressed the pressing need to mobilize financial resources for continental and regional bodies to strengthen African capacities to deal with conflicts. It was also underscored that in order to sustain peace, it was important to enhance regional integration by focusing on building infrastructure, focusing on jobs creation, food security. The fight against terrorism and transnational organized crime was also described as one of Africa's priorities, given the heavy impact of these phenomena on the human security landscape of the continent of Africa. The nexus between peace building and development was also put in perspective as calling for a continuum which has the potential to help in preventing a relapse of conflicts while addressing the root causes of conflict situations. The participants generally underlined the need for strong and effective strategic coordination among the so many actors that contribute to peace building at all levels. They have also stressed the centrality and value of the human life in all endeavors in this context, and noted that the relevance of the goals of human security was key for Africa's stability and development. The interactions between conflict prevention and peace building were also highlighted, as was the appropriateness of more resources to be mobilized from all sources, including the private sector. Local, national, and continental ownership was considered key for the success of peace-building efforts in the African continent. Finally, the many delegations welcomed Japan's commitment for partnering with Africa and agreed that the TICAD Forum could help in formulating a joint advocacy to sustain peace-building processes, including in support for an inclusive national dialogue, implementation of difficult peace agreements, help also to build and strengthen trust among parties, and ensure a wider regional commitment to sustain peace in any given country emerging from conflict. There was also a focus on the need of addressing peace and security challenges from regional perspectives in the Sahel-Sahara region, the Great Lakes region, as well as the Horn of Africa. Finally, participants agreed that investing in peace building was a very important way of making available a vehicle for promoting both peace and development throughout the African continent. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Lamamra. This brings us to the end of the reports from the thematic session. Once again, I would like to thank and commend all the chairpersons of 5 thematic sessions. Let's give them an applause. Thank you very much. As they reported to us, the thematic sessions have made interesting and far-reaching recommendations, and the issues raised and the recommendations made are all very pertinent and critical and in our development efforts. It was a brilliant idea from Japanese side to organize this session to make such kind of discussions, and we thank the Japanese organizers for doing so. Now it's up to us, therefore, to implement these recommendations and the agenda items which we have discussed. Having said this, lastly, I would like to ask Acting Chairperson Mori to say a few closing remarks. Excellency, you have the floor.
マイリアム議長ありがとうございました。そして、今日の5つの発表ありがとうございました。で、これから閉会式に移るわけでありますが、
In ceremony, and as you know, Prime Minister Abe has been running this long marathon from day 1 to up till now. He is now conducting the last summit meeting, the bilateral summit meeting. We call it a marathon summit, so the newspaper sells. He's been running without any rest. He may be able to become a marathon runner for the Olympic Games with this kind of training. And this is good for Africa, for Japan, for the world. I'm waiting for him to come in as I talk in this way, but I haven't got any contact that he is soon to arrive here. I was going to ask Prime Minister Abe to become the chairmanship of the closing ceremony. Now, I have been acting as the acting chair. I should like to take this opportunity to thank Prime Minister Haile Mariam, my chairperson, and other acting chairman for taking the post. Thank you very much. Appreciation to all of you. Athlete Abe will cut the white ribbon into the goal soon. Please stay there, because if you leave your seats, it's going to be hard for us to get you together into this hall again. So just use the remaining few minutes until our runner comes back to engage yourselves in congenial talks. Thank you.